All right, so this is going to be an important episode in this series on the nature of mind because here we're going to take a look at how the larger mind is able to segment off parts of itself into smaller minds. There is your mind with your own thoughts, feelings, and emotions that is separate from all other minds that you see around you, from my mind, from the billions of other minds on this planet. And of course, if you're counting animals and insects and birds, trillions of minds, really. And each of these are segmented or dissociated minds, right, within the one larger mind. And I'm going to explain this process of dissociation with a few examples. And the first example is a very powerful example of dissociation. And this is through a psychological condition or a disorder of the mind called dissociative identity disorder, or DID. It used to be called multiple personality syndrome or split personality disorders. And this is where you have multiple personalities existing within a single mind, within a single person's mind. This mind could have anywhere from 2 or 3 personalities. There has been a documented case where someone had over 100 personalities existing within their minds. And this comes about when there are certain gaps that occur within memories, and then the batches of memories between these gaps become a personality unto themselves. So, take for example, you have a 40-year-old male, and he has 3 or 4 personalities existing within his mind, where one of these personalities is an old woman. You have another personality of a child, and say another personality of a blind person. So each of these personalities could take over his mind, the host's mind, and each of these personalities are known as alters, ALTERS. So when the alter of the old woman takes over, he starts behaving like a 40-year-old woman. So if we are talking about how the physical body is a representation of your mind, right, then it doesn't get more obvious than this. Because when that alter takes over of the old woman, takes over the mind of the 40-year-old man, he starts behaving like an old woman. And if the alter of the child takes over his mind, he starts behaving and acting like a child. And what's even more surprising is that if the alter of the blind woman takes over, there's a drastic physical effect on his body because he can no longer see, even though his eyes are wide open. And the other alters could see using his eyes. He could see using his eyes, but when the blind person takes over, it's like that part of his brain shuts off that is responsible for seeing. And this has been proven because they hook these people up with these EEG machines, right? EEG scanners that they put on their heads, and it scans your brain. And when the blind alter takes over, that part of his brain that is responsible for seeing it shuts off, and he can no longer see. Now these people, they go for these psychiatric evaluations, right, to talk about their experiences and what they dream about. So when the psychiatrist asks these people questions, say about what they dream, what's surprising is that these alters, these personalities existing within this person's mind, they meet each other in the host personality's dreams. So within this host personality's dreams, each of these alters get a physical body, which is a representation of that personality's mind. So the old woman will of course have the body of an old woman, the child will have the body of a child, and of course the blind person will have a body where he won't be able to see. Now, what's fascinating is that each of these people views the dream from their perspective within one dream environment. So, for example, the child could take over the host personality, and he can talk about a dream where he was sitting, say, and playing with some toys, and he sees this old woman walk into the room, look at him, talk to him, and then walk back out. And then when the personality of the old woman takes over, she recalls a dream where she saw this child playing. She walks into this room, saw this child playing with some toys. She spoke to him for a bit, and then she walked back out. So this is interesting because take this example into the real world, into our environment. You have this environment which is occurring within the larger mind, right? And each of our minds are segmented, dissociated, alters personalities within this one larger mind. And we are communicating with each other, we are interacting with each other, talking to each other, all occurring within this one larger mind. So this is a very powerful example of dissociation taking place in mind. So another powerful example of dissociation is when you're asleep in bed and having a dream. So the dreamer's mind conjures up a dream environment, and within the dream environment you have you with your dream body. You are viewing the dream from your perspective, but there are other people in the dream who you interact with, right? You talk to them, they talk back, they respond back to you, they behave as if they have minds of their own. But of course, these minds are not existing somewhere else. They are all part of the dreamer's mind. In fact, the entire dream, the dream environment, all of the elements in the dream environment, your dream body, as well as all the other people you see in the dream with their own minds, all of that is segmented or dissociated minds of the one mind, the dreamer's mind. So that's another powerful example of dissociation and mind's ability to dissociate. Take that same example and bring it out into the real world. Another example of dissociation is when you can observe your boss at work, or maybe you're the manager of your own place of business. And when you go to work, you have to take on a certain role that may be different from the role that you take on when you're at home with your spouse and your kids, right? So there is that compartmentalized, dissociated role that you take on when you're at home versus when you're at work, where you behave a certain way to get the job done, right? And one final example of dissociation is when an actor goes to the movie set to play a certain role, and he's completely transformed in order to play that role. So mind has this ability to compartmentalize itself, to take on different roles. In some cases, these are on purpose, right? An actor puts on a role on purpose. But in these certain cases, 1% of the population, where mind can really dissociate and segment off parts of itself and create their own personalities within a single mind. And this is a powerful example of dissociation that may be occurring in the larger mind.